Hey, welcome back to Rust Order Garage. Let's continue on the 56 Chevy half-ton, $5,000 budget build. Rolled the truck outside just to get the fender on it. You can see what the wheel looks like in the wheelhouse. I think that looks pretty good. That's 1 inch forward of factory. I like it a lot. I found a few bolts in the cab that I could use to get the fender on here, but I'm gonna have to probably buy a front end hardware kit. I'm sure it's available for these older trucks because everything I find, there was actually Ziploc baggies with bolts and stuff in it, partially labeled that I could barely read, but it's like half the stuff's there, not all. So rad support is just kind of sitting on there with some bolts that are not right. And yeah, we're just kind of snapped together so you can see what's up. So as far as locating the center line on these Jags, this is my 1 inch forward of factory mark, and you see I have it pretty much centered with this upper control arm bolt. That'll get your wheelbase where you want it. If you're just going by that to say where's the center line on a Jag, yeah, pretty much center line of those upper control arm rear bolts as your center line. So that looks good. That's with the springs compressed with my tools, and that's about it. It's probably, right now there's probably about 2 inches over the tire. It's not gonna come down completely to the top of the tire. I don't think. It might come down another inch. We'll have to see once all the weight's on it, but I have it cranked down so that the bump stops are off the cross member, and that's probably about where it's gonna be with ride height. So while that's not super low, I think it looks good. The thing with these trucks is the fender well opening in the front is much higher than the rear. So with that fender like that, I think the rear fenders will probably be just over the top of the back tires. But again, we'll see when we mock it up. But I don't dislike it. I think it looks cool. So let's move forward. So with the front end tacked in, I mean, and it's just tacked in, I'm gonna have to come back and finish it off, of course, but it's where I want it. Ride height's gonna be good. It is gonna come down, I believe, at least another inch. I looked at a couple of different cars I put Jags in. The bump stops are actually quite a bit higher than that. So I think it's gonna work out good. But with that in place, next thing is gonna be start on the rear suspension. But before we do and tear all that out, let me show you what I got. We got wheels and sort of tires. This is going to work out, I think. These are a swap meet buy. I bought these last year at a swap meet for $300. I didn't know what I was going to do with them. Initially, I thought I might use them on the Buick, but the rears have such a high offset, they weren't going to work. And they're not perfect. The outer rims are really nice. The spokes are okay. You know, with some polishing, I think they'll come out, but I think they'll work out nice for this truck. The fronts, the tires are too short. These are only 215/60s. They're really short. And on a pickup truck with real big wheel openings and the fenders, they look lost. So I'm going to get 215/70s for these front wheels, which is the size tire I have on the Jag wheels that I'm using for mock-up, and that looks really good. But I am going to try to use these as is. So these are 245/60s. Yeah. So, which to me doesn't seem very wide, but on such a wide rim, they actually look pretty good. So those were, like I said, $300. I'm going to add that to the budget. Tires are going to be a wash, changing the front tires, because whatever I spend on front tires, I'll sell these and get it back. So call it $300. Let me add that to the list. So here's where we are right now. Nothing has changed because I really haven't spent any money yet. And things like the body mounts and stuff, I'll throw that money on when we get to permanently mounting the cab and that, because I'm not using them yet. So I'm going to add here wheels and tires. And the value is $300 because that's what I paid for them. Cost is $300. That's what I paid for them. So that moves the truck value to $2,600 and money out of pocket to $1,200. So still doing good, but I got something else to add in. This will be what I think the beginning of the rear suspension. This is the back half of a 2000 S10 pickup truck, four-wheel drive, which has the wider rear axle, which should be, I believe, 59 inches wheel mounting to wheel mounting. I have to confirm, which I think this will work with the wheels and tires that I think I'm going to use. It's all up in the air right now. But anyway, I knew I needed leaf springs, and I prefer to get S10 leaf springs because they're relatively short front to back. And actually, in this case, the front half from the spring eyelet to the pin is 26 inches, which is exactly the same as the 56 factory springs, 26 inches from eyelet to spring. So that's cool. The back half's a little longer, but not huge, so they work. A lot of other leaf springs out of these small trucks like Rangers and Dakotas are actually longer than this, and that can be a problem getting a hanger on the back and still having room for a bumper and such. So I prefer the S10 springs. Here's the 2000 S10 pickup, rear axle, all cleaned up out of that frame section. So, like I said before, this cost $200. Not horrible considering the leaf springs are recent, the U-bolts are recent, so it'll all come apart nice, I hope. Rear axle is I think it was a 342 posi. Haven't opened it to confirm, but hey, it's all good. That's a perfect gear for what we're doing here. And I saved the upper shock mounts, of course, to try to make those work. I don't know if I can or if I even need them. And of course, I took whatever I could off of it. Looking at the frame, it looks like somebody did some butchery here. It looks like there were shock mounts at the top on this cross member, but they're gone. So, but I don't know if I'm going to be using them anyway because I got something else I got to do here in the back, but I think I can still use that cross member. We'll get to that when I show you how it's all going to work. But somebody, yeah, must have cut those off. I'll take a look at the 58 chassis and see what that looks like. Yep. So there used to be riveted shock mounts on that cross member. I don't know why somebody would remove them, but they did. But they're simple enough to make, so I'll be making my own, I suppose. Get to that when we get to it. I don't think it'd be that big a deal. So as long as that rear axle works, I know the leaf springs are going to work because I'll make them work. And I got some other parts to show you too with that, but we'll add that onto the list. So that's going to be the, I'm just going to call it rear axle and springs. Call it 200. Cost me 200. Brings the truck to 2,800 value and 1,400 out of pocket. Now, let's talk about why I picked what I picked and how it's going to work. All right, so let's talk a little about rear suspension. Well, how do I pick what I pick? Well, first off, I know I'm not keeping any of this. I don't want to reuse those leaf springs. Could you? Yes, you could remove the overrider springs and reuse these springs, and you'd probably be ahead of the game. But I don't want to use them because these were work trucks. They were made to haul stuff, and I'm building a street rod, and while it'll still be able to haul stuff, it's not going to be hauling thousands and thousands of pounds. Can I throw an engine block in the back? Sure. But I'm not going to throw a ton of dirt in the bed. All right, so I'm going to get rid of these springs. The other reason I'm getting rid of them is because they're 2 inches wide, and the standard leaf spring anymore is 2.5. So we're going to go with something a little more modern. The overall length of these springs from, let's see here, grease fitting, which is another reason to get rid of them, because no one's going to be greasing their leaf springs. Sitting here unloaded from that grease fitting hook in here, it's about, call it maybe 51 inches on center for these springs. And S10 springs are probably the narrowest, or let's say the shortest that I know of. Believe it or not, if you look at leaf springs from like a Dakota or Rangers, they're longer. And that can be a problem too. So just hooking on the nut there, so it's a little bit forward of the center line, if I can. I'm looking, come on now. We're right around 51 as well, because that's going to come forward off that nut. So the S10 spring is almost exactly the same length as these. And you can go longer. It's just that you run into issues with how far back is the spring going to be. And that's where we come into mounts, because I'm not going to keep any of these cast iron mounts, obviously, with the grease fittings and all this. They're all going away. What am I going to use? Well, here's what I'm going to use. These are Ford Ranger hangers. This is a full kit I bought online with front and rear mounts and shackles, you know, and bolts, hardware, everything for $100. You can't get it for the S10 pickup, because the S10 pickup actually mounted the leaf springs underneath the frame rail, so they use a completely different style of mount. But that Ranger kit works, so that's why I chose S10 leaf springs. Depending on what you're building, you may or may not want to use S10 leaf springs, but in my case, they work out good. Now, as far as the rear axle and rear tires, well, this all depends on what you have and what you're trying to work with. First off, as a reference, you measure, this is stock, at least I believe stock, the outside tire to outside tire. That gets you an idea of where the factory setup was. Now, you'll have a little bit of room usually. The tires are always not all the way out to the edge of the the fenders there, so, but it's a good reference. So this measurement was, let me see, I got a hook on a tread there. I'm at about 67.5, plus I'm hooked on a tread, so 67.5 plus called inch and a half back to that tread, so 69 inches from outside tire to outside tire. Doesn't mean that's as wide as you can go, but it's a good reference. So if you know that, now you can start working backwards. Okay, so assuming you have your wheels and tires before the rear axle, which is normally how I do it, I have these set on the ground 59 inches outside to outside. Then I get a measurement from wheel mounting surface to wheel mounting surface. Gives you an idea of how wide a rear axle will put those wheels in the same position. Now my measurement here is 57 inches. So you either find an axle that's 57 inches, or you find something different and see if you have enough play to make it work. So with wheel mounting at 57, that's pretty narrow. From what I remember, I believe G-body is around 57. But the thing is, even though this is a low buck build, I think it'd be cool for bragging rights to say it has four-wheel disc brakes. So try to think of what kind of factory rear axles around that width have factory disc brakes, because I could put something together. I mean, you could put a G-body 7.5, a later one, and I could put, say, third or fourth, say fourth gen Z28 disc brakes on it and make something work. But most people are just going to want to grab something out of the junkyard and put something together. So the easiest thing to find is the S10 rear, like I picked up. Now that is
59 inches wheel mounting on the four-wheel drive version. Two-wheel drives are 54 and a half, 54 and a quarter. So you could put spacers on that and make that work no problem. But I got this because it was available. So this is 59. So that's an inch wider each way than what I show on the chassis right now. Thing is, that may not be all I can do on the chassis as far as width. Normally, when I'm doing this, I take the wheels and tires that I have and set them underneath the body of the car or under the bed if the bed was on the truck. Set it down, and then you can move the wheels in and out and figure out what you have as far as play, as far as axle width. Now, these are pretty wide rims. They're 8.5 inch wide. So I'm asking for 1 inch wider on each side, and I think I can do it. And even if it looked silly or didn't work, I could always switch to 7 inch wide rims instead of 8.5s and suck them in that difference, and it would be fine. So I'm not too concerned with it. However, because I do have the 58 truck over there with the bed on it, I took a quick look at it, and actually the tires that are on the 58 are wider than the chassis I just measured, and they fit fine. And in fact, they are actually an inch further out than these. So I think I'm going to be just fine with these wheels and tires. We'll know for sure when we put the bed on, but regardless, it's not a situation where if I put this S10 rear in, I will not be able to put wheels on the truck. Something's going to work. Even if it's not these, we will definitely be able to make something work. So I'm going with the S10 rear, 59 inches wide, wheel mounting, and we're going to see how it works out.
All right, preparing for rear suspension work. Took apart the S10 setup, was able to save the U-bolts, obviously saving the leaf springs, saving the shocks, and it'll all get cleaned up later, but I just took it apart to get it easier to handle. And we got our wheels on. It's nice working in an area where no room, can't see a damn thing. Anyway, next thing is going to be taking everything off of this rear suspension, which is going to be a lot of rivets. All the rivets for each side of the hanger, which 1, 2, and I know there's going to be some underneath, right? Yep, 3, 4, so that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 rivets just for the spring mounts. And then while I'm here, this cross member is going to get moved backwards. I don't know where yet, but I'm going to take those rivets out. So that's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And then this is going away. 25, 26. Yeah, so I got to take out a whole lot of rivets. I'm not going to videotape that. You know how I take them out. Brute force is the only way to get them out. So I'm going to blow all those rivets out of there, either with the plasma or the cutting wheel, knock them out, get this rear suspension out of the way, and then we will move on. Oh boy, it is the next day. I stayed out here last night and got most of this done. Say I'm down to the last 4 rivets. Now I'm down to 3. All right, that's it for the side rivets. The rivets underneath are ground down, at least the heads are off, but there goes that one. All right, now it's fumble around time, and this will take hours. So, no, I'm not going to videotape it all because you're not going to want to watch me doing it. But I'll explain what I'm doing. The way I'm doing this is I know where I want my axle center line to be when the truck is loaded, when it's at ride height. I know leaf springs are going to compress and the shackle's in the back, so the axle is going to move rearward once it's loaded compared to unloaded. So what I've done is I have my bump stop rivet mount on the side of the chassis there, and according to the drawings, the rearmost rivet is where the axle center line is. So I'll assume that's underweight, under load. So what I did is I marked the rivet in front of it. I marked that, and that is about an inch and a half forward of where the axle is going to be under load. So with that in mind, I just picked a spot on the frame where there was a bolt hole that was, let my shackle just temporarily bolt, or say shackle, let my front leaf spring mount temporarily mount to the frame. I just picked a hole. It was there, and it was in the area that around, I explain this, it puts the front eye of the leaf spring very close to where the original was. And because I'm using these S10 springs, they're pretty close to the original as far as length and pin location. So I just picked a spot. I don't care. It doesn't have to be the permanent location. It's a reference, okay? So I have it bolted in there, and the front eyelet is actually about an inch forward of where the original spring was. Now what I'm going to do is, and the reason I pick a hole that's already on the frame is that I know it's a good reference on both sides. No tape measure involved. I just bolted it in with that one bolt that'll work and clamped it. So now it's sitting there, okay? The next thing I'm going to do is I got to cut the pads off the rear axle, the leaf spring pads. They were so close, I thought they might make it, but they didn't. Get the axle under there on a new set of pads if these are destroyed. Lift up the leaf spring. The rear hanger you see here with the screwdriver, same thing. That actually bolted in pretty much where the factory spring rear mount was, okay? One bolt hole lined right up, the other one's half. So I have a screwdriver jammed in it for now. Again, just a reference. What I want to do is get the rear axle in it, or on the springs, get the springs bolted in, loosely obviously, and then just let the truck down. I want to see what the angle of my shackle is, because I know under ride conditions, ideally, the shackle will be straight up, okay? And that's, it's bolted on, so I can't show you, but I will show you. So when I have the leaf spring in, I want the shackle angled forward to the front of the car. Then when the leaf spring compresses, the shackle will go up. So ideally, it'll be straight up and down when the truck is at ride height and done. Does it matter if it's not? No, it doesn't have to be perfect, all right? You gotta understand, keep things square and in place as they should be, you know, so things track straight. But as far as your 1/8 of an inch here and there, front and back, it doesn't matter. You don't have to split hairs over this stuff. The wheel openings are big. No one's going to care about an 1/8 of an inch either way. But the idea of this is get the rear in on the springs, get a look at it with all the jacks gone and just sitting here. I'll pile some weight on the frame to try to simulate load if I can, if I have enough stuff here. And here, that's like, I don't have enough stuff here. And try to get it, the spring compressed, just to get an idea of ride height and axle center line. And then if I say, okay, I got it loaded, rear axle is too far back. Well, how much? 1/2 inch, inch. I can use the holes that I mounted those hangers with as a reference. So I know, okay, just drill a new hole, 1/2 inch forward, 1/2 inch back, whatever you need. Same with the back, and make it work. Okay, see if we can get these cut off and see what things look like.
maybe savable with some work.
Mock-up continues. So I've got the pads off the rear axle and just rolled it up under, bolted the leaf springs in loose. Again, reference area only for my mounts. I just have them set where I think is a good spot, but not permanent yet for sure. And I'm gonna bolt this in with U-bolts, but my mounts here for the rear brake hoses are in the way of where the U-bolt's gonna go. So I'm gonna buzz those off and they'll have to get relocated. But I'll get the U-bolts in and then I can actually roll this thing outside and get a look at it. Well, there you go. Simulated weight. I got 7 tires and wheels on it. I don't know, call them 25 each, so 175 pounds. So that's, you know, that's a full tank of gas on the back, and that's where the tank's gonna be. We'll talk about that later. But I like what I see as far as distance for my shackles. Now, the location's not gonna be the same. This is good. I've got weight on it. My shackle is straight up and down. And I'm sorry, I said shackles again. I like what I see as far as the distance between the hangers. Because with a full tank of gas on this right now, my shackle is straight up and down. Now, it is going to have more weight than this because of the bed and the bed wood and such. So I may make a little adjustment for that. But based on my wheelbase measurement, looking at my 58, my measurement from, say, the door opening, the door gap to the center line is about 28 inches. I'm at 26 and a half right now. So I am going to move my front hanger rearward 1.5 inches from where it is. I'm going to move this one back maybe at least 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches to get a little bit more, load ability on those springs. And I'm also going to lower that shackle a little bit because I keep saying shackle. I'm going to lower that hanger a little bit because with the shackle straight up and down, I'm at about 2.25 inches over the frame rail, which is about really cutting it close with the bed rail cross members. So I'd like to lower that at least 1/2 inch. I'll probably lower 1 inch just to be safe. And that'll actually raise the back of the truck a little bit. So then when the bed comes on, it'll even out a little bit more. But so far so good. So, you know, don't be scared of this stuff. You just throw it together, get it square and even where, you know, on the truck, and then figure out if it's in the right spot or not. Now, if I didn't have my 58 as a reference, I would have to lower the bed on here, eyeball it, and go from there. I'm just going to hope that 58's the same, and I believe it is. I like the way that 58 looks, so I'm going to go from there and use those measurements. And where I ended up with the mock-up that I came up with is with the weight on the truck. I'm pretty much, my axle is pretty centered with the center rivet. And I've seen people do that. I have to double check that because this is what the drawing says is the real center line, rearward. So I think I'm gonna do that. I'll double check my measurements, but I think I need to move the tire to the back. All right, that's gonna be it for this one. I just looked at my measurements again. I'm gonna move the front hanger back 1 inch and move the rear hanger back 1.5 inches and maybe down a 1/2 inch or so, and said make the rear of the truck a little bit higher so when I put the bed and everything on, it'll even out. I don't want it tail dragging. I just want it a little back up in the back or level. Good for me. But so far so good. So this is probably, I think the last video I said was quick, and it really wasn't a fast video. Oops, sorry. It was not a short, it wasn't a short video. This one, I don't know, is it going to be short? I don't know, we'll figure it out. But there wasn't a whole lot to show you as far as this kind of stuff here, but just put it together. It's pretty simple. I mean, just bolt it up, put it together, see what it looks like. there's no rocket science to this thing. Make it so you like how it looks. Say that's where it's going to be. Put it in. So I'm just going to be drilling a whole lot of holes. I got to fix a couple spots. So were a couple spots of rust in the frame that were behind the original hangers. Common area, you know, water gets trapped. So no big deal. We'll cut it out and weld some steel on that. Otherwise, these new spring hangers are going to bolt in. And it'll be pretty simple. They came with new bolts. So I'll use all the new bolts. And yeah, I don't know. It's pretty simple. It's coming together good. So I'm not sure what the next video will be on it, but there, of course, will be one. So thank you for subscribing. Thank you for following along. And we'll see you on the next one.